Assalamu alaikum everyone. I'm going to be with you guys between the hour and 5 and 6 today. And I will be speaking about forgiveness. This is a topic that actually is extremely difficult to talk about. I've been sort of meditating for the last, 5-10 minutes just now, just to ground myself, because it actually is a very hard topic for me to speak about, because obviously there are some wounds inside of me that still need some healing. And so talk about these things actually really brings them sort of front and center. And so I want to talk a little bit about what forgiveness is. Why should we forgive? How is it good for us? And then how we should forgive. So I'm going to organize the talk in this way. And then I would love to hear some of your questions if you guys have some. So thank you all again for being with me. So when is forgiveness relevant? I think there's a lot of people who speak about forgiveness, and is it when we are slighted by the person at a dinner table that we never met before? Or is it a betrayal? I mean, who deserves our forgiveness? When we think about forgiveness, it's usually people that are very, very close to us that we feel very, very hurt by. So it's usually not something big it's not often something big that might have happened, but it's somebody that we had some high expectations from that seems to have let us down. So it could be an act of betrayal, which is obviously very, very painful, but it also could be that, they didn't stand up for me when I needed them to stand up for me. So who are we looking to forgive here? And I'm sure that all of us have someone that we can forgive in our life. And I want you to sort of bring that person in to this conversation as we are talking about forgiveness. I am thinking about a couple people in my life, and I'm sort of bringing them front and center as I speak about this. So I want you all to do the same. So let's talk about forgiving and what it means. Okay, so before I tell you what it means, I'm going to tell you what it doesn't mean. Forgiving does not mean that it's okay. A lot of times we feel super defensive about forgiving another person because I will not forgive him because he doesn't deserve that, because he's wrong, right? So we think that if I forgive him, that means I'm telling him that he's right. So forgiveness does not mean that what he did was right or she did was right. Forgiveness does not mean that you are accepting what happened to you. Forgiveness does not mean that you're ready to even engage in that relationship with that person. Forgiveness is not about I forgive you and it's finished. Forgiveness is actually quite a process. So forgiveness is not about the other person, is what I'm trying to get at. It's not about me saying that what this person did to me was okay. I'm okay with it. I want to be their friend again. I want to re-engage in a deep relationship with them again. That is not what forgiveness means. What forgiveness does mean is that I just want my heart back for me. I want all of me back with me, because anytime we are wounded, anytime and this goes way back when, anytime we feel some pain or we struggle or we hurt, we are actually leaving a little bit of our energy in that past moment to hold down that grudge or that resentment. Grudges and resentments don't just come out of nowhere. Remember, guys, emotion, energy in motion, energy. Anytime you take some of your energy to hold back a past moment, that means there is less energy inside of you. And so forgiveness is really about, I want to let that go so I can bring that energy into myself in this moment so I can actually create the future that I want. I want to let that go so I can connect to a level that I am able to connect to with people, because anytime there's a wound, there's a scab. When there's a scab, there has been no healing, or there's a bandage. Imagine you have a bandage and you have a wound underneath and you just have a bandage. You still can't feel the touch of another person if there's a huge bandage around it. And so it's really about letting go of anger, letting go of resentment, letting go maybe even of the other person, but just saying, I want my energy back with me. And that's what forgiveness really means. And that actually is a very complicated issue. It's not easy, because if it was easy, then we all would have done it. It actually is easier. We spoke about generosity last week. I think it's easier for us to be generous because we're operating from our highest selves. It's easier for us to be grateful because we're operating from our highest self. Forgiveness is from our wounded self, and that is where we become quite vulnerable. And vulnerability is not something that is easy for us. And so I just spoke about who we're looking to forgive. We're talking about what forgiveness is not and what forgiveness is. I would like to say another thing about forgiveness, which is that it is not a place you reach. I spoke to one of my friends yesterday, and she said, I am forgiving. I am forgiving her for what she did to me. And that is precisely what forgiveness looks like. Forgiveness is not a place you just get to. So if I say I'm forgiving you, it's not all of a sudden everything is magical and all of a sudden everything feels good again. No, there's a difference between forgiveness as a journey, and there's also a difference between forgiveness and healing, because what they might have done to you might have been something very, very painful for you. And so you make the intention to forgive someone, but that does not mean that inside of you all is good and all is healed. It could take you quite some time and quite a lot of work for you to actually forgive the other person. So I want to almost say that, like grief, you know, when someone dies, we don't just say, okay, well, just get on with it. We say grief comes in waves. And every time a wave comes, you sort of, you know, go through the wave. And the waves are sometimes loud, and sometimes they're quiet, and sometimes they're huge, and sometimes they're not so big. And that's kind of how forgiveness happens. It comes in waves, and there are days where you're completely okay, and then there are days where you're knocked down by that wave. And that literally is what forgiveness looks like. It could literally be a lifelong process, but it's an intention that you make, that I no longer wish to be angry about this. I no longer want to give any of my power to this. So I just want to say that it is a lifelong process. I have my notes in front of me, guys, so just stay with me. And so, okay, so the question is, all right, now this person really hurt me. Now, why should I forgive this person? Why should I forgive this person? And that's really hard. And I, like I said, this is like a really emotional topic for me, and it makes it a very human thing, I think, that all of us are struggling with, that there's a person out there that hurt us years ago, maybe, that is still hurting us inside, and we refuse to let that go. So why should we let it go? We let it go because there is, imagine with every wound you have, every wound that you have, you actually have a scab that goes over your heart. And that scab starts to build a wall. And that wall disconnects us from people. Walls don't figure out, oh, who's the enemy and who's the friend. A wall is a wall. So if your heart has a wall around it, you are going to keep out your friend and your enemy. And you're going to keep out the people that are your well-wishers, as well as people that you don't want to have any contact with. So this is about really letting go of the wall. And that's what forgiveness is about. I know every religion and every tradition says forgive because it is good for you. And we think that, you know, we're forgiving because it's for the other person. We are forgiving because it is good for us. We are forgiving because it allows us to take off the shackles of the past. It allows us to heal the scabs and the wounds so our heart can function fully. It allows us to take our power back from the past, where we've been literally giving our power away to hold down all these grudges. we are forgiving because we are not truly fully ourselves unless we have let go of everything in the past, the good or the bad, but especially the bad. And so forgiveness is an act of self-love. It's an act of self-care. It's an act of really bringing back your full power. And I'm seeing some questions here. One was, I have an intention to forgive, but I don't know how to, and I don't know why I can't forgive. And so I'm coming to that. Hold that thought. And another question is, yeah, okay. So everybody's talking to each other. That's fine. How does it affect creativity? So again, we're going to go back to the why. The why is we are doing this because we want to be in our full power without giving our power away. You know, there was a story about two captors, two sort of war prisoners. There's a story, and two war prisoners meet after years and years of being sort of, you know, held in captive by their enemy in a war camp. And one man asks the other, and he says, have you forgiven your captors? And he says, no way, I will never forgive them. And then the other person says, well, they still have you imprisoned then. It really is about us not being able to be in our full power because we are still holding on to our past. And so how does it affect creativity? It 100% affects creativity, because if I have this much energy to start off a day with, and I'm giving this so much of my energy to all the different grudges, because holding on to grudges is not just, oh, this one person hurt me and so I'm going to hold a grudge onto her. It's a habit. It's a person that we become because our heart is so wounded over that we actually hold on to all sorts of grudges. We start to hold on to the small ones and the big ones because it just becomes our habit. It becomes who we are. And so I think it's really important to acknowledge that the forgiveness is not for the other person, it is for yourself. And one question that I've been sort of really struggling with is, why is it so hard for me to forgive? I'm a good person. I acknowledge that it's for me. I know it's for me, but why is it so hard for me to forgive this person? You know, and I think there's a lot of things that stand up inside of us when we actually think about forgiving another person. And that is, you know, I think if we can, actually, I would like you to do an exercise. I want you to do an exercise. I want you to think of a person that you wish to forget. I want you to take some time, and I want you to do this with me. I want you to think about a person that you wish to forgive right now in your life who has hurt you. Think about what they did to hurt you, and don't think about it too much because we don't want to go too deep into that. But I want you to think about that person and the event and that they hurt you. And then I want you to let go of one aspect of that story, okay? And that aspect is, look at what she did to me. Look at what he did to me. I can't believe he did this to me. This blame story, imagine that this story no longer exists. I want you to try this. I want you to really be inside of yourself, because it's a physical experience. It's a visceral experience. That this person really hurt me is no longer a story you can tell. What is that story covering deeper inside of you? That story is probably covering a lot of shame, a lot of rejection, a lot of abandonment. You know, I had a client that I worked with, and there's a method that Tara Brach uses. It's called RAIN, which is called recognize, allow, investigate, and nurture. And when we talk about why is this good for us, I think it's so important for us to recognize that when we are forgiving another person, that person just came to tell us the wound that needed to be healed. And once we can acknowledge that, then the healing can begin. But it really isn't about the other person. And so when you recognize that there is a lot of deep-rooted shame, there's pain, there's vulnerability, there's grief that we are trying to heal, it almost becomes too overwhelming. It is easier for us to stay angry with another person. It's easier for us because it takes up less energy, actually. Grief is very heavy. Sadness is very heavy. Rejection is very heavy. And so when we go in and we start to feel, if I didn't blame her, what I actually would need to feel right now, we would actually feel a lot of shame. And so the reason why, so that's one, I want to just say that we are sort of rejecting a lot of our shame and our sadness when we are holding on to anger. So it very little has to do with what they might actually be doing to us, but what has actually been triggered inside of us. And so I want us to talk a little bit about how is it that we can forgive and why is it so hard for us to? Because I think this is where most of us struggle. We know what forgiveness is not. And I would like to add a little bit to that, because forgiveness is not holding something over people's head. I don't just get to forgive you and then hold it over your head. I forgive you and I let it go. Okay, so that's true forgiveness. And whether that person is in your life, whether that person has died, whether that person is no longer going to be in your life, forgiveness is an act you do for yourself. So how is it that we can forgive? So we can let go of some of this toxicity, and we can drop down some of this wall that we have built from wound to wound. Every wound has a brick. Every wound has a brick, and brick by brick, we build up this wall. We think we're going to protect ourselves from other people, but we end up keeping ourselves away from joy and love. Somebody is saying about books. I actually don't know a book about forgiveness. It's a very strange thing, but there's not a lot of stuff written about forgiveness. It's a very strange thing. I've been looking for reasons why it's so hard for people to forgive. I haven't been able to find it, but I was able to find that forgiveness is. So I just want to talk a little bit about how we do the forgiving, okay? Because I think this is where most of the magic will happen, and then we can take some questions. And so when we are angry with another person, our worldview becomes very narrow. I want you to think about a person you love and they've done something to hurt you and you forgave them. And then I want you to think about a person who hurt you, but you're just unable to forgive. You see how narrow you are looking at them. You're stuck in almost a blame game and a blame sort of experience. But if you think about a person you love and you forgave them, you are able to see them as a whole person. Okay, well, they did something wrong, but they're also this, and they're also this, and they're also this. So when we come to the how of forgiveness, I want us to practice a little bit about just sort of experiencing it. So I'm going to again ask you, I want you to think about a person that you want to forgive. I want you to think about that person. And before you start engaging in that story about what they did to you, I want you to first recognize what is happening inside of you. What kind of feelings arise inside of you when you think about that person that hurt you? I want you to allow those feelings to come. You're angry. Don't judge the anger. It doesn't make you a bad person. You're hurt. You're disappointed. I think allow some of these feelings to exist inside of you. And then I want you to investigate. Like I said, this is Tara Brach's RAIN version, which is recognize, allow, investigate, and nurture. I think the one thing which I didn't know before, just a few days ago actually, is that we think about forgiving another person we think about giving something to another person, we think about letting something go, we think about any of this, we don't realize that we first have to nurture ourselves. We first have to be with ourselves before we can engage with any storyline of the other person. So if I'm thinking about someone who has hurt me, and I sit with the anger and I sit with the hurt and I contact it in my body. This is not about, oh, this reminds me of my mother and this reminds me of my sister and this reminds me of whoever. This is about me just sitting with the pain. And if I go to the pain, I see the anger and it's hot and it's burning, and I see underneath it there's something else. So investigate it within your body, contact that pain in your body, and don't bring your mind or have it be an analytical process, and know that it's a felt sense. I want you to feel the pain of what the other person did to you, and then I want you to nurture that pain. I want you to put your hand on your heart and say it's okay, that you're good, and that no, they didn't reject you, they were just hurt themselves, or you're not a rejectable person, and that you're worthy, and that you are, this shame that's coming up inside of you. Because when I think about forgiving one person in my life, I think, was I rejectable? Was I not worthy of their loyalty? Was I not worthy of their love? And I feel rejectable. I feel that they rejected me. I feel abandoned. I feel hurt. I feel sadness. I feel grief. I feel loss. I feel disappointment. And those are really heavy feelings. It is so much easier to be angry than to feel that I was not good enough, right? It's so much easier for us to feel that I'm angry with you because you are a bad person, rather than I'm not good enough because you didn't stay. Because if I had been good enough, you would have stayed, and that you still would have loved me, and you would have fought for me, and that you would have fought for this relationship. That is very difficult to do, to sit with the grief and the sadness and the shame of being feeling inadequate. Because underneath all sadness usually are some of these feelings. Underneath the sadness usually is a layer of shame. There's a layer of guilt. There's a layer of hurt. There's a layer of disappointment. There's a layer of loss, that what I had is no longer. There's a longing underneath the sort of place where we are looking to forgive. It's much easier for us to stay in a space of anger than to soften in to our own sadness. And so when I say, how do we forgive? Forgiveness begins with yourself, nurturing yourself and having an internal experience with that sadness. I think it really is about acknowledging all the pain, all the suffering, every single time someone hurt you, every single time someone rejected you, every single time you felt not good enough, every single time you felt someone let you down, every single time you felt inadequate. That is sitting underneath the anger. And so to acknowledge that is overwhelming, and it takes space, and it takes courage to be vulnerable with that experience. Because what if I break down and I never come back out again? I've actually had people say that to me, that what if I break down and I never stop crying because it's too heavy for me, and I can't tolerate the grief of this experience because I feel so sad underneath all that anger. So the forgiveness is really just holding us together. It's our fight or flight response. It literally holds us together until we're able to do the hard work of grief work and shame work. There's a lot of shame underneath that. And so one way I would say is to really go through the 4 steps is to recognize the feeling inside. Just forget about the other person completely. Bring forth what they did to you. So think about that person, bring forth what they did to you. What are the feelings inside of you? And then allow that feeling to sort of stay. Don't judge it. And then investigate it. Where else have I felt this way? Who else made me feel that way? When did I first feel that way? Why is it so hard for me to stop being angry? Because if I stop being angry, what else would I have to feel? I think this is where we nurture, which is the N. We nurture that part of us, and we love that part of us, and we recognize that we don't take anything personally. If they hurt us, it was about them. If they love us, it was about them. We only worry about what we can do and what we put out into the world. We cannot take anything people do to us personally. There's people that are probably saying wonderful things on this chat, and then there's people that are going to be saying negative things on this chat. That isn't about me. And so if someone hurts me, it's not about me. And if someone loves me, it's not about me. It really is about the other person. So how do we stop taking some things personally? It's very, very important that we do that. So I'm going to take some questions now, and then I'm going to talk about some of the other things that we can do, because I see a lot of people have some questions. I'm going to read some questions. Yes, so someone made a comment that we forget to love ourselves enough to do this. 100%. This is really about your inner child work. And I don't want to sound a little bit, sort of foofy and fluffy, but this is a wound. And I call this the original wound. A wound where we might have felt when we were very, very young. From a parent, from a teacher, where we didn't feel good enough. We felt like if we just did better, someone would love us more. It's a very, very old wound inside of us. And this person just came to trigger that wound. So it says, hey, this one needs healing. And then what we end up doing is we end up scabbing over it, and we say, no, we're not going to heal. And then another person comes and there's pain. And then we end up scabbing over it, and we say, no, I don't want to do this. And then we build up this huge wall that blocks us from engaging with other people. And so each person in your life that came to wound you came to tell you where you need healing and where you need to love yourself. And so it's very, very important that nurturing ourselves first before we forgive ourselves, because we will be much more able to forgive other people when we have tended to ourselves first. This is something I didn't realize before, you guys. I used to think that I have to forgive and then I will heal. I have to forgive and my journey of healing will begin. That's actually not true. I have to heal and then I can forgive, because there's parts of me that have been triggered as a result of this wound. So it's very, very important. Someone said some seek vengeance instead of forgiveness. I don't know, there's an African tribe, I'm not sure which one, but they actually say vengeance is a lazy form of grief. Vengeance is a lazy form of grief. And that just means that you are so deeply hurt by what the other person did that it's just easier to be angry. It's just easier to have a fight or flight response, because to soften in to the grief would just make you too vulnerable and too exposed to other people's pain or to your own pain. So that's what I would say about vengeance. And by the way, as I'm saying this, I'm telling you, it is absolutely so difficult. I journaled about this morning, that there's people in my life that have hurt me so deeply, and I wish to forgive them because I just want to feel good. And it's not something that I feel I think about every day. It's not these people I don't think about every day, but I just know that I'm not whole in myself because I haven't let some part of my past go. So I think this is just important, that it is an ongoing journey. It's an ongoing intention, and that person is going to come back up again, and then you're going to forgive them again, and then you're going to breathe into the pain, and then you're going to nurture yourself. It's like a cycle. So somebody said, can you explain the RAIN method with an example of a real forgiveness story? 100%. So as I was telling you, there's a person who has hurt me. Okay, so what I would do at that point is I would recognize that there's anger. There's anger inside of me, and I allow, which is the A. I allow the anger to come, and I don't judge it. It's okay, it's okay. You just say, it's okay, just let it be, and you're angry. Then you investigate, which is the I. And investigate not in an analytical way, oh, this reminds me of my mother, and this reminds me of my father or my uncle, whoever. You investigate in your physical body. Where is this pain? Contact it in your body. How does it feel? What color is it? Where does it sit? How heavy is it? How much of your energy is it taking? Like, just stay with the physical pain. And if I were to remove the blame story, look at what she did to me. I cannot believe she did this to me. What am I covering up? This is what investigation looks like. You really gotta, like I'm telling you, I spent like almost 2 years investigating something. Why is it so hard? But I just couldn't acknowledge that there was shame underneath that. And so when you're investigating, you stay with the pain and you stay with the anger, and you go underneath the anger and you say, if there was no anger, what else would I feel? And then when you sit with that, you realize that there was betrayal that happened, that you felt someone betrayed your trust, you felt vulnerable, you felt exposed, you felt a deep shame that I was not good enough for this person. You feel that this person is able to be loyal to other people, but why weren't they able to be loyal to me? Why am I so inadequate? This is all part of the investigation. You stay with that. And I feel rejectable. I feel sad. I feel a deep sense of pain and shame and a longing, because I really loved her and I really care about her, and I can't believe it's over. So there's a grief and a loss there. And that she didn't sorry, I got a bit sorry, I got a bit emotional, but it really is about acknowledging that you felt that that you just didn't feel good enough. And I think acknowledging I think the Ramadan is getting to me, but this topic is very sensitive, as I said. And that acknowledging that you didn't feel good enough, or you didn't feel adequate enough, or that you felt ashamed that they didn't care about you enough to know you better, or that they didn't give you the benefit of doubt. And how come they didn't give you the benefit of doubt? Was your love not good enough? I think this is the work of forgiveness. And then the N goes to nurturing that part of yourself which is hurt. And that part has been hurt by many people before, and this was just another person that came and hurt you, but it just tells you that there's inside of you a pain that needs to be healed. And that's the work of forgiveness. And I think that's where I think we most often go wrong, is that we think it's about the other person, or that we need to start with the other person, when we actually need to heal inside of us, and then actually forgiveness becomes a lot easier. Um, yeah, I'm taking a deep breath, guys. But I don't want to be inauthentic. I don't want to make it seem like, oh, I'm a psychologist and I have it all together and forgiveness should be easy. This is hard work. It is hard work, and grief is super heavy, and shame is super heavy, and this feeling of powerlessness is super heavy. So this isn't easy. That's why people say it takes a brave person and a courageous person to grieve and to forgive. This is why, because it takes a lot of suffering to get through this grieving journey. And I hope that I explained the rain person. So whoever asked me, you made me cry. Yes, I'm crying. Yes, I was crying in that moment. And thank you for your love. And let's see, I think, okay, and another way, there's a lot of people who say they have issues with their mother or their father. And I wanted to mention that because sometimes the hardest people to forgive are our mother and father. We love them, but we are really feeling quite angry towards them. And I think one way to sort of let go of that anger is to imagine them that they're not your mother, or they're not your father, or that they're not your friend, or they're not your husband, or they're not your wife. Drop the role and imagine them as a person. And then I want you to imagine them as a child. Okay? There's a story about a man who is walking through a forest and he sees an animal, and the animal looks really cute, and they go to pet the animal and the fangs come out, and the person gets scared and they get angry with that person, and the fangs are out, and and that person is saying, oh my God, I need to stay away from this person. And then immediately we see that the paw is stuck in a trap, and that's why the animal is reacting the way they are, is because they're hurt. And this happened in the movie Skywalker, where she goes under and she sees a snake, and the snake is hissing and the snake is attacking, but then she realizes that the snake just needed some healing, and then the snake led them to the path. And so it really is that hurt people. People who suffer make others suffer. And that we just have to recognize that if there was a hurt done by you, by a mother or a father or a sister or a brother or a husband or a wife or whoever, that they didn't mean to hurt you, but they're a person inside of themselves. And imagine them as a child. Imagine them at 5 years old, or imagine them at 7 years old. And imagine them being told off by a teacher, or maybe by their own parent, or maybe they were bullied, or maybe they just didn't feel good enough. And that person grew up and they became your mother or your father or whoever. And there's a whole history behind that person. And I think people who are not parents maybe not understand that. I know as a mother, I am absolutely flawed. And I'm probably, hurting my kids all the time. I hope I can ask for their forgiveness and seek their forgiveness all the time. But I'm doing the best I can, and so did your parents, but their best was just different from yours. And so imagining them as a child who's not your parent, who's not in the role of the mother with all these expectations, really allows you to see them as a human. And this is what happens when we are unforgiving of people. Our aperture narrows. We start to see people in a narrow way. We start to see people in just that one thing that they did and not anything beyond that. And so I think it's important to acknowledge the humanness of the other person and say, man, this is like, we're all flawed. One mantra for this is that, he hurt me just like I hurt another person. Or, just like me is the mantra. He is so rude, just like me. She is so mean, just like me. Because don't ever tell me that you've never lied to someone, or you've never been mean to someone, or you've never hurt someone, or you've never. And even if you didn't intend to, We judge people by other people. We judge them by their behavior, but we judge ourselves by our intention. Maybe another person didn't mean to hurt you. They just were acting out some trauma of theirs. Maybe they were acting out some addiction of theirs, or there's some hurt of theirs. And all it did was it impacted you because you just happened to be part of their life journey. So sometimes we need to zoom out a little bit, that not everything is about you. That if I hurt you, I might have hurt inside of me and I didn't even know that I was hurting you. But I have to work something through, and I have to heal some part of me that might be impacting you. I just didn't know it. And so forgiveness really becomes about, first, let me just recap. It's really about going through that RAIN process with yourself, acknowledging all the hurt and feeling it, as I did in front of all of you just now, which is gonna go up on YouTube, which is fine. Feeling it, and then allowing it to move through you, allowing it to sort of release, nurturing yourself. That's step one. Step two is about making the intention to say, I forgive the other person. First, just nurture yourself, and then say, I forgive the other person. And then the third step might be that you have compassion for the other person, that you really see. Now, when I sit back and I constantly say to myself that this person that hurt me so deeply, I imagine what her childhood must have been like. She went through a difficult childhood, and that I was just another person in her life story, and I miss her. And I wish we didn't have to end like that, but that's kind of how you sort of nurture and then forgive, and then you do it again, and then you do it again, and then you do it again. Yeah. Thank you. I'm gonna now look at some questions, guys. Yeah, okay, good. I hope I explained this. So how to nurture ourselves, that's a great question. I think anything that makes you feel like you're loving yourself. There's things we need from people. Sometimes we need a hug, and sometimes we need to be told that you're okay. Sometimes we need to be told that everything is gonna be fine. This is kind of what you need to do to yourself. And research shows that if you put a hand on your heart, it soothes your nervous system down, just like you were getting a hug. And so sometimes you just need to put a hand on your heart and say, it's okay, everything is gonna be fine, and you're gonna be okay. And you need to reparent yourself almost. You need to become the parent of that inner child. And so forgiveness actually ends up being inner child work. So how to train yourself to not take things personally. I think there's two parts to that. One part is that if you know yourself and you know what your values are, you know how you're acting, you can be honest with yourself. Because if I think back to this one friend that hurt me so deeply, I think, maybe I could have said, that last interaction we had, I didn't operate from my highest self. I wish I would have spoken a little bit softly, or I wish I would have hugged her before she left. I wish I would have called her the day after. So there are things inside of me that I know that I didn't sort of step up to. That would be very important to acknowledge as part of this process. The self-awareness is part of nurturing. So being aware of where you could have done things differently and writing that down and saying, I will make sure that I do that next time. I will make sure that I don't make that same mistake next time. I make sure that I recognize the trigger, that when I get hot-headed, that something might come out of my mouth that I don't mean, and that I apologize right away. That's very, very important part of forgiveness, is you have to learn the lesson so you don't feel so much shame. We're all human. We all make mistakes, guys. Me, you, everyone. And so recognizing the parts of you that need to be named and tamed, right? Because there are parts of you that come out that are not so perfect, or maybe you withdraw completely. So you're not one of these like active, angry people, but you shut down. And that shutting down doesn't allow people to have access to you. knowing that part of yourself and then saying, I will not do that again, that would be part of nurturing. And then really just nurturing yourself. What would your friend say to you? What would you want your friend to say to you? How would you love yourself in that moment? How would you care for yourself in that moment? That might be that you just need a really long nap, or you need a cup of tea, or you need, to just hang out by yourself or watch a funny movie. Anything that's going to help you feel that you're just being loved in that moment. And just don't wait for another person to do that. As you can tell, I buy myself lots of flowers. That's another way you can do it. I really love aromas and scents and, a little bit of time by myself. And these are, journaling would be a great way. These are all ways where you feel loved. So whatever that love feeling is, and you might actually go to people in your life. You don't have to just do this by yourself. You can say to your husband, your wife, your friend, then, listen, man, I need some TLC right now. And can you just nurture me or love me, because I'm being very hard on myself right now, and then I made these mistakes and I wish I could have done things differently, and she hurt me and I'm letting this go, but I need a hug. And so it could look like that as well. Okay, so this is somebody who said that they're hurt. They hurt because they're hurt. So does that mean it gives them an excuse to be dishonest? Remember, guys, forgiveness has very little to do with the other person. You do not have to talk to that person ever again if you don't want to. You do not have to, engage in that relationship if you can't. Forgiveness is not about the other person. Forgiveness is about being fully within yourself and healing yourself and letting that go. You do not have to tell the person that you forgave them. You do not have to do anything related to the other person. This is really all about you, that I just let this go. I don't want anything to do with this anymore. I just want to be back in my power again. I want to feel whole again. I want to feel soft again. I don't want to be all scabbed and walled and all of these other things. I just want to feel fully again. And that can't happen if we're all guarded and protected and, not letting people in because someone hurt me. We're not living life fully that way. So forgiveness really is about taking off these shackles of the past and allowing yourself to be fully in this moment so you can live life fully. That's what forgiveness is about. I think they need to take the word give out of forgive, because it looks like we're giving something to someone else, but it actually is about us. I actually didn't say anything about forgiving ourselves. I think sometimes that's the hardest part, right? We did something, or we hurt someone, we lost that person, or we said something mean and that person never came back, or we did something that shamed us. No one knows about it, only us. That is something that we really struggle with sometimes. That we sometimes think that if I forgive myself for doing that, if I forgive myself for cheating or lying or doing anything, that I might do it again. This is where we're wrong. If you forgive yourself, you might actually heal the parts of you that are acting out in ways that are inconsistent with your values. If you listen to that part of yourself that is hurting, that is doing things that is not consistent with your values, you might actually move in the direction of being able to live a life that is fully you and compassionate and loving and kind to yourself as well. Sometimes we feel we can't forgive because we might make that same mistake again. So we have this sergeant kind of mindset with ourselves. Oh, I didn't mean to make you cry. But it's okay to cry sometimes. And I think we can all, I think forgiveness is something that resonates so much with all of us, doesn't it? Yes. 100%, Hanan. If someone asked me, does low self-esteem slow down the process of forgiving others? So as I said, that forgiveness starts with you, your self-worth, your self-esteem, your wound, your pain, your healing, you. So of course, if we feel we are not worthy, if we feel we are not good enough, if we feel we are not adequate, if we feel we are not deserving, of course, we're going to have a very hard time forgiving someone else. The part of you that feels all of the things I just mentioned, that's the part that first needs to be healed. And please, guys, don't wait for another person to come heal this part. That's your job. It's your responsibility. You take ownership of that part, the part that says, I'm wounded, I'm hurt. Nurture that part, love that part. The more you know about yourself, the more you know your strengths, the more you know your virtues, the more you know your values, the more you'll be able to actually not take things personally. Self-awareness is absolutely key, guys. I hope to do a session in the summer on the lighthouse about the inner journey and how do we just get to know ourselves a bit more. So like I said, forgiving and forgetting is not the same. And so there are people who are asking, like, do I have to forgive and forget? You know what? Eventually when you forgive, you'll forget too, because it just no longer means anything to you. So don't worry about forgiving and should I forget and then forgive. Like, don't worry about any of that. Forgiveness is an act of self-healing. It's an act of self-love. It's freedom. It's releasing yourself of toxicity. It's engaging with life fully. It's being open to new experiences. It's being full of hope rather than of pain. Forgiveness is about letting go of the past so you can take the energy into the present and create the future that you want. Forgiveness is about that. It's not about the other person. So forget about forgetting and forgiving and the other person. Engage with the wound. Know that they brought that wound to the surface. It was probably already there in some way because we're wounded children, generally speaking. They brought a wound from childhood onto the surface. And that's your job. That's the job for you to heal. And most of us, you, me, all of us, have the wound that we are not good enough. We have the wound that we are rejected. We have the wound that someone will leave us if we are not our best self. Most of us have that wound. That's the wound that needs healing. And like I said, it's a process we go to again and again and again and again. And the pain comes and then again. And then some days are great and we're free. And then some days we're in the thick of it. And that's literally how we are engaging with forgiveness. It's a process and sometimes a lifelong journey. So I want you all, I hope that I made that super, super clear, that forgiveness is for yourself. And I'm now reading some of the questions before I have to log off. Yes, this talk is recorded. It will be on the Happy UAE YouTube channel. It will also be on their live Instagram live for the next 24 hours or however long they keep those things on. And I think I have nothing more to say. Do you guys have any other questions for me? Any other questions? You know, as the sun sets and as, you know, iftar comes closer and after you've heard this talk, I want you to just go away a little bit. I'm gonna do that. I want you to sit with some of your pain. I want you to make an intention to release that pain. I want you to decide to just let that go so you can bring all of your power into yourself. I want you to write about it. I want you to allow yourself to feel it. I want you to forgive yourself. I want you yeah. So I want you to just stay with this a little bit. Don't just jump off of this and get onto something else. We've all just gone on a journey, and I hope that all I can hope for is that all of us continue to do the work of love and boundaries. Like I said, because we've forgiven someone doesn't mean we let them back into our life or we accept that what they did to us was okay. We continue the work of boundaries. We continue to do the work of self-worth. We continue to do the work of letting go. It's all work, and it's lifelong. And so if you guys have any questions about this, my Instagram channel or handle is on, it's pinned. Please make sure that you message me. If you guys want to know more about this, I'm going to continue to do the work. Perhaps we need to have like a forgiveness support group where we come together and we all cry and we all hurt and we all suffer and we all decide to let go. And we all come and take our power back, and we create the life we really want, and we live fully and we engage fully. So thank you for being with me, and thank you for sort of sitting through silent, awkward silences, and I really appreciate your guys' words and your love. And I will be back again next Monday, and I will be speaking about another value called gratitude, and we'll talk more about that. But if you have any suggestions about any other values you would like to know more about, then let me know, and we can always change that. But for now, we will be speaking about gratitude. Take care of yourselves, guys, and keep me in your prayers. Bye.